Okay, we are live.
Can we?
A little bit? Yeah.
Yeah.
How's it?
Okay, that's good.
Everything okay? Okay. We are live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Apologize for the delay, but we are here now. Julian is here now.
Yes.
We're very glad that he is here with us today. I had the very good fortune to have Julian as a professor when I was in college at Cornish College of the Arts, and very lucky to learn a lot about music and life from Julian. He was very patient with all my questions, and I have many questions today as well. And we've done a couple of these before live, but this is the first one that we're doing recorded. So if you guys have questions that you'd like to ask Julian, feel free to let us know, and we'll do as many as we can. And if we can't get all the questions answered today, then we'll certainly do more of these in the future so that we can all benefit from Julian's knowledge and experience. So first things first, for people that don't know you, Julian,
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about how you got started with music when you were, what got you into music? How'd you get going?
Okay. I came up in a household with 5 siblings, and we had a piano in the house. And my siblings played piano. I'm the youngest of the clan, and so I had a lot of influence from my brothers and sister, and my mother played piano. So my father was a Baptist minister, and so I was really, how can I put it, influenced by the music in the church. Okay, so and my brother was a jazz fan. Okay, so we had recordings, we had jazz records, and I was fascinated with the music and also with the names of the players. You know, the players with names like Monk, Diz, Bird, Kook. It was like, science fiction for me, at that young age.
Yeah.
But it all came together in high school, because I'd studied the piano, and I could already read music when I got to high school.
You learned to read from your mother, is that correct? Or from family, or? I would go to the piano. I was, gravitated to the piano because my brother played, and the recordings that he played over and over, they would repeat certain passages, by moving the needle back, and they did that so often. I would go to the piano and pick out those sounds on the piano, and so I learned by ear first, and that was really a blessing to get that music in my ear, because when I was forced to study, which came later, I already had, actually I started out with trying to trick my piano teacher. She would give me a lesson, and I would take my lesson over to my cousin's house, who also studying the piano, and she was a little bit further advanced than I was, so I'd get her to play my lesson for me, and I would memorize it, and I'd go back to my piano teacher and play my lesson by memory, and she tricked me one time. Ha! She put a piece of music up on the piano that was different from my lesson, and here I am pretending to read music that I'm playing from memory, not paying any attention that there was a different piece of music on the stand. Yeah.
There. So actually my little trick was discovered, and so she reported me to my parents, and I got the blessing. I got blessed out, actually. But it was a really a great moment in my life, because it forced me to get serious. I mean, I already had talent, but it forced me to get serious about it, which actually helped me to really delve into how can I put this, the nuts and bolts of music.
Yeah, well, what I was going to ask is, so you've already, from a young age, you were working on developing your ear, playing by ear, which, as most jazz musicians know, that's a huge skill set, tool set that we want to have.
at what point, how old were you when this occurred, where you had to learn how to sight read and start dealing with that?
Okay. I was about 10 or 11. 11, maybe. Yeah, I would say 11. And yeah, that's, well, that was when I was taking the piano lessons. Okay. I wasn't sight reading at the time. When I learned how to sight read is actually, well, it was in that same era, time-wise. I might have been even actually 12-ish, getting close to going to high school.
Yeah.
I was already, I knew a little bit about the piano. I could hear music, and because of my experience at home, listening to the records and going to the piano and picking out the little melodies that I could do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, age-wise, I was just turning just before teenagers. I got sight reading, so by the time I got into high school, I was a little bit further advanced than some of the other students there because I could read.
Yes.
And it was kind of an accident that since I was a pianist, I studied the piano. I wanted to play piano, in high school, but there were also half a dozen other students who wanted to play piano, and so I had to get in line. So in the meantime, I asked my teacher, my high school teacher, gave me a glockenspiel. You know what that is?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That turned me against the piano.
I think it would turn many people against the piano, and in some instances, music for that matter.
Yeah. So I asked my high school teacher if I could play a horn, because I didn't want to play the glockenspiel. And I didn't know what kind of horn I wanted to play. I'd heard a rumor that one of my older siblings had once played the trumpet, so I told my high school teacher I wanted to play the trumpet.
Well, quick question here, to interrupt, I'm sorry. But so you had been playing the piano, and you had as an inspiration, you said Monk, and of course Diz, and horn players, and all these bebop players.
Charlie Parker.
Yeah, of course. So coming from playing piano, you didn't have, so you talked about Monk, but I'm sure like Bud Powell or maybe any of the older piano players that listen to any of those guys as inspiration too, or?
Well, no.
Okay, fair enough.
No, they were too far advanced. I mean, I was just being introduced to it, and I mean, playing the piano was sort of like growing up. I grew up around the piano, so that was my connection there.
Yes.
And but I was really in love with the music. I wanted to play like Charlie Parker.
Yeah. So how did you settle on the trombone then instead of saxophone?
Okay. My high school teacher gave me, since there was the trumpet was another situation where you had to stand in line because there were other students who also wanted to play the trumpet. So my high school teacher gave me a baritone horn, like a euphonium.
Yes.
It has the same fingering system as a trumpet. So the idea was that I could, in time, I could switch from the baritone horn to the trumpet. But it so happened that the mouthpiece that I was using on the baritone horn happened to be the same mouthpiece that fits the trombone. And there was no precedent for the baritone horn playing in jazz at that time.
Yeah, I was going to say there's that album Ready for Freddie, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he's playing euphonium, and he's ridiculous. He sounds great. Do you remember who I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah. I'll give you his name in a minute. Bernard, what's his last name? Anyway, that'll come back. So I wanted to play in the jazz band, and so the trombone came into my life then. It wasn't a conscious decision.
It wasn't a punishment.
It was just a coincidence. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I fell in love with it. You know, there was this guy named J.J. Johnson that played the trombone,
Yes.
and he was inspiration. You know, it was really. I mean, he played with Charlie Parker. He played with Diz. He played with all of those people that I had put up on a pedestal, and so I just grew into it.
At your high school, is it Crispus Attucks? Is that what you went to? No.
DuSable.
DuSable, excuse me. So, were there any contemporaries of yours that were that went on to be well-known musicians as
Yes.
well, or who else did you go to school with?
Who did I go to school with? Charles Davis, Richard Evans, bass player Richard Evans. Richard Davis is also a bass player who was in the high school. He was a couple of grades ahead of me. He was older, and that same high school was actually Johnny Griffin graduated from there.
Much ahead of you, or around the same time?
Much ahead of me, yeah. I think Gene Almond also went to that high school.
Wow.
Yeah, quite a few individuals came out of that high school and went on to have professional careers playing jazz music.
So, anyone that's read the preface to this interview has seen the cavalcade of people that you've worked with and played music with, and so from high school, what happened from high school? What was the next point of departure?
Well, okay, we're talking about 1950s, right?
Yeah.
Early 50s.
A good time for music.
Yeah, great time, and it was also the institution of the jam session, where most of the clubs, the jazz clubs, and at that time there was jazz clubs in the neighborhood. You didn't have to go all the way downtown, spend a lot of money. You can just go, a couple of blocks away from where you live, and there's a jazz club, and the music was wonderful. You didn't have to spend a lot of money. You were invited to come up on the stage and play, and so that's where I sort of polished my, the competition between the players at the jam section was intense. So it was like competition is the best word I can come up with.
But not negatively, yeah, yes,
Some
or what?
of it was, because they play little dirty tricks on you.
Such as.
Like they're called tunes. Like for instance, like the song Cherokee. Yeah. It was one of the favorite songs because it's up tempo, and for the trombone it was like really, really hard. And they would do stuff like the concert key for that particular song was B flat major, right? They would sneak in and play that song, start off the song in B major, and not tell me that it was in B major. I wouldn't find out until I played my first note, thinking it was in B flat. Embarrassment. Embarrassment. So what that did was I went home and learned that song in B major, and it actually was a benefit.
Yeah, I've heard some stories about Sonny Stitt, and I know you've played with him too, and of course he's one of my heroes.
Yes.
Where he would play a tune, like, let's say, for sake of example, like 12-bar blues, and every chorus would go up a half step.
Right.
So did you ever experience any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Or yeah. Well, make
that
sure
was
you
later
practice.
on, though. That was later on.
Yeah.
But it was a great education.
Yes.
It was a wonderful education for me and for everyone who participated in that.
talking with musicians from that generation, it seems like musicians there was much more community, a sense of community than there is now today, and it seems like there's much more willingness to help share information. Where now it seems like in all aspects of the music industry, whether it's better or worse, it seems much more competitive now because maybe, I don't know, I mean, there's many sides to it, but less work, less clubs, less support from the community, because jazz is not, the popular music of the day. What are your opinions about any of that?
Well, I have a lot of ill feelings. Music, for me, after a while, once I got proficient in everything, and I wanted to, like I said before, I wanted to play like Bird, and I wanted to play like Clifford Brown. It was another hero of mine, and it turned into more than just a how can I tell it? What's a term I can use? It was more than just a musician. I loved the music so much that I wanted to be. I turned into the artist. I wanted to play that music at a higher level than the commercial, the popular music. And the reason for that is that the popular music was really sort of influenced more by the business, the music business, than it was from an artistic, point of view. So that was a conflict for me. Not only me. I mean, I'm sure it was a conflict for most serious jazz musicians, because it's more than just a notion, to get into that music. It becomes more like a religious pursuit, So I was very serious about it, and I came into conflict with the commercial aspect, That's where the money was coming in, from the commercial aspect, because the record companies and the music business wanted to develop that it's capitalism.
Yes.
And it sort of rubbed me the wrong way, I was respected more for playing schlock than I was for playing what I considered serious music, and that, like I said before, that rubbed me the wrong way, and I kind of developed a psychosis, because things weren't moving in the direction that I wanted to go in, and although I tried and avoid being bitter. That's another thing I got from my high school band director. He suggested that if we developed a positive attitude toward the way we live, we can avoid a lot of that clashing, a lot of the anger. Approaching life in a positive way, it works. I found out that it worked for me. It proved my point that here's one of the things. I never did try this one. Here's one of the lessons that my high school director tried to develop our minds, our attitudes. He said, if you go, the band room in the high school is on the third floor. Excuse me. My high school director said you can walk from the third floor of the school building across the street to the roof of the building across the street without going down to the ground. You could walk on air, is what he's telling us. If you believe strongly enough that you could do that, you could do that. And if you apply that to life, a lot of things will come out on the positive side for you. And I never tried to walk across the street.
Thankfully.
No, but I did adopt that positive approach to everything. And stuff would just fall into my lap as a result. I attribute that positive attitude to the fact that things were coming to me, you know. And for all of my career, that's what happened. And when I left Chicago and moved to New York, went to the 5-spot where Thelonious Monk was performing. Johnny Griffin happened to be playing with Monk at the time. Johnny took us, including Monk, to his apartment after the gig, fixed breakfast. We stayed up all night talking, and you imagine how I felt being in the presence of Thelonious Monk. I was, you know, 20, 22, young 20.
How old was he at the time?
How old was
Monk at the time?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. But you can imagine the impression that made on this young kid. You know, I'd say kid, but I was like in my early 20s. And compared to the rest of them, I was a kid.
Yeah.
So it just grew from there.
So from again, I mean, after you've played with so many folks, when you first got to New York, so you were hanging out with Monk and Johnny Griffin. Who did you go out with? Who was the first like name musician that you started working with, like a large name?
Okay,
group?
Johnny Griffin introduced me to Oren Keep News at Riverside Records. Oren Keep News gave me a job in the shipping department, so I can earn some money. So I can pay, get my own apartment and pay rent and feed myself. That put me in close contact with other well-known musicians. Let's see, who was there? Kenny Dorham was also there. Philly Joe Jones was there. And a few others whose names I'm not gonna say that right now, but I was around those giants of jazz. My first recording for Riverside Records, Oren Keaton was put together the rhythm section for me, and in the rhythm section, Tommy Flanagan was playing piano. Sam Jones was playing bass. Elvin Jones was playing drums.
No pressure.
No. I mean, that elevated me, my stature.
Yeah.
In my first recording, I had Elvin Jones playing drums for me. Hey. So.
Did those guys treat you kind of like a rookie, or were they?
No.
Yeah, down to earth.
They didn't. They were warm and friendly and encouraging, supportive.
Are there some things that you've learned? Because I mean, always as I'm a musician myself, as you know.
Yes.
But we're always trying to figure out, not only the how to practice, but what to practice. And I'm sure just in conversations with those folks that you've learned lessons that you've carried through to this day. In terms of like things to do, like how to be a better musician. Are there anything that you can recall, takeaways from being around those people that you really learned from?
Actually, it's just being in their presence that was more inspiring than any kind of verbal instructions that they gave me. I was just trying to, rise to the moment. I'd already sort of been through the in Chicago at the jam sessions. I had all the lessons that would help me when I got to New York. I had also developed some confidence. I had don't take this seriously, but I had an attitude towards saxophone players.
None taken.
Because saxophone players,
they didn't know when to stop playing.
It's still true in 2020. You know that, though.
And I would just get frustrated, So I would make sure I got to the microphone before they did, because if I didn't, I'd have to just stand there and wait until they finished, because they didn't like to stop.
Yeah.
I can understand that, but yeah. So I mean, to this day, I'm sort of competitive. If there's a saxophone player on the stage, I'll try to get to the microphone first.
See, all the years that I've known you, I've never, when I've seen you perform, you've always been the nicest, sweetest, most humble person. I've never got a sense of competitiveness and the most sharing.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is I would be practicing in college in the halls, and I knew that you were in your office. So anytime that you were there, I'd try to take the opportunity. Hey, Julian, let's play some duets. And even if you were doing something else, you'd say, "Yeah, come on in, let's play."
Yeah.
So I've never felt that from you at all. So it's interesting to hear that.
Well, academia is a whole different mindset for me. I mean, I'm there to give, and so any kind of attitude that I would have as a professional on the stage at night is different from the attitude I had at Cornish College, I felt that my goal was to share, to give, and that's was a recognizable trait that all the students were exposed to, and I felt that was the only route to take, and. I've been around, people, musicians, who had developed a bitterness that they expressed all the time, and I was never that comfortable around those people.
Are you talking about a bitterness towards the music scene and the music business in general, or
just
life in general?
Almost everything. I wasn't comfortable in their presence because the conversation was not uplifting. They were complaining about this, that, and the other thing, and it just put a damper on being around them as far as I was concerned, and so my friendship was narrow. I developed friends with people with like similar attitudes, who had mostly a positive approach to life, and weren't spouting dissonance. I'm still like that today.
Yeah. Well, again, there's so many questions that I want to ask you, but along those same lines, I got the same feeling from Hadley Kalaman,
yes.
who was there at the same time. I was
Right.
very fortunate to have both of you guys as instructors there, and he was always the same way, very giving of his time, and less laid back than you, I would say. Not disrespecting Hadley at all, but he would tell you his opinions about things.
Right.
You know what I mean.
Yes, I do know.
So how did you first come in contact with Hadley? Because I know that goes back to California, I believe,
San Francisco.
I think all of us that were around Cornish at that time, like late '90s, early 2000s, to have you guys there was great because you guys taught the jazz history class. So the first semester we had Hadley teach part of jazz history,
Yes.
and then the second semester we had you teach jazz history.
Yes.
So we were hearing from the people that actually lived and breathed it, what was going on. So what was your relationship with Hadley? How'd you guys meet, and how'd that come about?
Oh, we met on the bandstand. He lived in San Francisco, and we developed a really close association musically and personally. As far as saxophone players, Hadley was special.
Would you try to get to the microphone before Hadley? Sorry, I couldn't resist. I'm sorry.
That was sort of my, yeah, that was.
Sorry.
That was sort of my, you know, I mean, that was ingrained in me, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, still today, you know. But I'm less of a stickler about that now, you know. It's not as important as it used to be.
Yeah.
You know.
So you guys met in California and
We met in
played in bands
California,
together?
and we worked together in California and developed not just a close association, but it was a friendship, you know. And you know, I love playing with him, you know, and you know, he felt the same way about me. And it was just fortunate that both of us wound up here in Seattle at, you know, similar times. I came here in '79, I think. Hattie came in '80 or something like that. Right, you know, it was great, you know, having him here, because we would go to the jam session at Tula's, and anytime I heard that Hattie was playing somewhere, I would try and get there.
Yeah.
And pretty much he had the same, you know, attitude towards me, and it was a great loss when he died.
Yeah.
You know.
You guys would make an effort to go here and play with one another
Yes.
as much as you could.
Yes.
Yeah. So who ended up teaching at Cornish first? You were at Cornish first?
I was there first.
Okay. And at the time that you came there, because they've had tons of great faculty members over the years that have come and gone. Who was there when you first got there? And how did you arrive at Cornish? How did that come to happen?
Okay. Jim Knapp suggested to the president of Cornish at the time, I'm trying to remember his name now, it'll come to me. Anyway, Jim Knapp recommended me, so I got a call from, I was teaching at this summer workshop, Cazadero workshop, and John Dykers, who was also teaching at that workshop. He's a classical vocalist, and he was married to. I'm having a senior moment here. John Dykers' wife.
From the Gamelan.
Oh, shoot. No, I can't remember. I know what you're talking about. I don't remember.
She taught composition at Cornish.
Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah.
They were married. Dykers and she were married.
Who?
John Dykers and she were married.
I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. They were married. She and John Dykers were.
What's her name?
I'm trying to get it. It'll come to me.
Okay.
Julian's wife Nashira is here keeping us honest and on track. So thank you, Nashira.
Okay. So, yeah. And so John was working with me at Cazadero, and he asked me if I would be interested in moving to Seattle to join the faculty at Cornish College. I was recently married. We had our first child, and he was about a year and a half, 2 years old at the time. And San Francisco was traumatized by the assassination of the mayor. When the mayor of San Francisco was assassinated, the gay community rose up in arms. Because not only was the mayor assassinated, one of the councilmen was assassinated who happened to be gay. Now, here I am in San Francisco with a young 2-year-old child, male child, when the whole city is up in arms. Gay community is up in arms. Now, I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do here? How am I going to raise this child in this environment? So when I got an invitation to get out of there, I jumped at it. So when John Dykers asked me if I'd be interested in coming to Seattle to join the faculty at Cornish, I said yes. Before he got the whole sentence out, I was saying yes. You know? So that's how
That's how you got there.
inspired me to come to Seattle.
And so when you got there, so Jim Knapp was there, and who else? I
Jim
know
was there.
Gary Peacock, was he there
Gary
at the time?
was there. Jay Clayton was there. Of course, John Dacres was there, and well, most of the people who were there when you were there were there when I joined.
Yeah. Well, I got there in 1999, 2000. So
Yeah.
it was you. It was Hadley Kalaman, Chuck Deerdorf. Who else? Randy Halberstadt.
Yes.
Jovino Santos
Yeah,
Neto.
yeah.
Dave Peck. Jay
Yeah.
Clayton was there.
Yeah.
Who am I forgetting? Oh shoot, Margie Pose. Margie
Margie,
Pose.
yeah.
She auditioned for I did the rhythm audition with her and took
Yes.
her theory class. She's wonderful.
Yes.
In fact, I think she lives in Tacoma now.
Oh yeah.
Who else? I know I'm forgetting folks, but that was kind of like, so much great inspiration for
Yeah.
all of us that studied there at that time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I mean, there's still a lot of great folks there, including another person that's in Tacoma now, Janae Kendrick, great vocalist. Have you worked with
yeah,
Janae?
Right. Yeah. I
She's tremendous, and Cornish is very lucky to have her.
have. Yes.
So, okay, well, again, there's so many. The clock is ticking here, and there's so many things I want to ask you. So I want to know about. Well, first of all, just my selfish question. I want to know about Sonny Stitt. What is your history with Sonny Stitt?
Okay. Well, back to Chicago. At the Flames Show Bar in Chicago, Sonny Stitt had the gig there, and forgive me, but this is the one saxophone player that I let him play.
Fair enough.
Anyway, I walked into the club with my instrument and asked Sonny if I could sit in. He said, okay. And then, all right, I got up on the stage with him, and he mercifully counted off a tune that wasn't going 1,000 miles an hour, which he does easily.
Yeah.
But he called it. I forget what the tune was, but I played and didn't embarrass myself. I had a lot of respect for Sonny for doing that, and that was pretty much all of it, as far as my personal connection with Sonny. I always did love his playing. I kind of felt a little bit sorry for him because he chose the same instrument that Charlie Parker played, and for me, Charlie Parker was God.
Yeah.
And so I kind of felt a little bad, but Sonny picked up the tenor, which I don't blame him, because there's less competition on the tenor. There's no Charlie Parker at least.
Yeah.
But there was a Sonny Rollins and and others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's an album. One of my favorites of Sonny Stitt's is a live album. Two of them, live at the hi-hat. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but there's this one track on there. It's Tri-Horn Blues, and he plays alto, tenor, and baritone in the span of one tune, and it's just ridiculous. I mean, amazing. It's amazing.
Yes.
Makes us all want to just put our horns away and just reconsider our life decisions. Well, okay. How about Duke Ellington? What's your association with Duke Ellington?
Okay. Again, a different situation for me. I was one of the youngest, maybe the second youngest band member, and I'm in the company of these older gentlemen, who I respected, but I was out of my element.
In what way?
Well, they were playing music that was more associated with the swing era, and I'm influenced by more modern jazz, bebop in particular. And I'm working with Duke Ellington, so I can't really. It was proven to me that I had to try to change my style because of one incident. Fortunately, we were at a rehearsal, not on stage, but we were playing this song, and there was a trombone solo, and there was like a 4-bar break before the solo, and I played the 4-bar break, and when the downbeat comes for the chorus to start, it was silence. Everybody stopped playing and turned around and looked at me. You know, I was playing too much. You know, I was out of character for that music.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I realized at that point that I had to change my character in terms of my style of music. So I started adopting the older style, you know, which was okay, but it, you know, I became an older person.
Yeah.
Mentally.
Yeah.
But I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
You know, so I fell right in with the older guys and got my bottle of scotch in my pocket, you know, and I'd go to my hotel room and, you know, sip on scotch.
Yeah.
And wear jacket and tie during the daytime. You know, that's what everybody else did. But I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
And, you know, as miracles happen, a miracle happened for me. That the band was getting ready to go to Europe, a European tour. The night before the tour, I'm packing, getting ready to go. And as my habit, I wait till the last minute. I couldn't find my passport. I'm all dressed, my bag is packed, and I can't find my passport. I even go to the airport, thinking that maybe Duke can, you know, pull some strings so that I can make the tour. Didn't happen. So the band went off to Europe, and I stayed in New York. I was one of the things that Duke, one of the impressions that I got from Duke is the characterization that he made of me. We were walking across the tarmac. We were already in Europe on a State Department tour, and we were playing for performing for the non-commissioned officers in the Army. So we were actually on an Army base, and we were walking across the tarmac to go to the plane to leave, and as we were walking, I started up a conversation with Duke. I asked him about whether I was going to get paid for a recording session that we were preparing for, and Duke's reply was, he said, "Well, Julian, you know, what do you want? You know, after all, you're just a trombone player."
Wow.
Hello.
Wow.
That hit me like a brick.
Yeah.
So when I got back to New York, stranded, I just decided that I wasn't going to be just a trombone player.
Yeah.
I was going to get my own band and, you know, raise myself up above just being just a trombone player.
Yeah.
So I went for that, you know.
We all see the end result and the recordings and the glorification, and I'm in no way talking trash about Duke Ellington, but when people actually see the economics behind a lot of these things, it's atrocious how musicians get treated behind the scenes. When they see the concerts, but they don't see what goes on, you know, behind closed doors.
Yes.
In your opinion, speaking to this and getting off track here, and if there's anyone that's listening that has questions, feel free. We're going to open things up to start answering some pretty soon before we run out of time here. So just kind of hogging the show here, but feel free to ask, and we'll try to get to them.
Sure.
So, Julian, in your opinion, in terms of the economics of music, in terms of like club play, because you know, a lot of us day to day, when we're not in a pandemic quarantine, you know, we're playing in clubs.
Yeah.
How do you feel, in your opinion, based on living through all of that stuff when it was in its heyday versus now? Was the club pay better? Were conditions better for musicians in the 1950s than they are now, or is it about the same?
No, it's about the same. Clubs make their money off of liquor. You know, they want to sell liquor.
Yeah.
And the music is sort of to accompany that. That's so I fell out of favor with working in clubs because on occasion the audience is not really there to listen to music. And the music that I'm playing is listening music. It's not dancing music. It's, bebop. And, you got to listen if you want to get anything out of it. And, people who have conversations while the music is going on. I can understand that to a degree, but at the same time, if that's why you came here, why don't you go to a concert hall where, well, no, that's the opposite. In the concert hall, you're forced to listen. But just go to someplace else, where they don't have serious music.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that bothered me is that jazz music wasn't considered serious music. Even to this day, to a lot of people, they don't think of it as serious music.
Yeah.
They're not aware of the hardship that's suffered by jazz performers. Just to get to that level, to learn the craft. It is a craft, and it's a lot of time and pain put into it on our part as musicians. I have dropped that term as it applies to me, but I have to use it because that's what the public knows me by. But I've adopted the term spontaneous composer. I'm dealing with spontaneous composition, and as a soloist, that's what I'm doing. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
We're creating a spontaneous piece on the spot. And we're not getting respect for it. Yeah. In fact, the audience doesn't even know what we're doing. We're playing jazz. And what is jazz?
Yeah.
What's that term? Where did it come from?
Right. it doesn't have the most glorious beginnings, that
that's
word.
Right. That's right. And that's one of the faults that we are suffering today as creative artists. And I try and spread the word around, don't call me a jazz musician. Just refer to me as a creative artist, creative musician, if anything, because that way I think that you'll enjoy the music more, and definitely I would enjoy the respect that you give to the music, and me as a purveyor of the music. And that's come around. I've noticed that to a great degree. But the majority of the public, of the audience, they want to see the spectacle.
Yeah.
They want to come and see the show. I can understand that. But what has to be straightened out is that we have to be educated that jazz, what so-called jazz, deserves more. It deserves more respect, for the hard work and dedication that goes into creating this music.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that it's not a fling.
Yeah.
We devoted years of hard work in order to develop the ability to do what we're doing, and we want respect for that.
Yes.
If you're going to come and whatever your motive for coming to this place to hear this music, we want you to hear. We want you to come and listen.
Yeah.
If you're not coming to listen, then why are you coming?
Yeah.
You're going to complain because you can't dance this music? Sometimes that's what happens.
Yeah.
But I think that you're on the wrong path if that's what you're coming for, to have a conversation, while the music is in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of dedication, just for the listening audience, we tried to do this through the internet. Julian and I have spent probably around 6 hours troubleshooting, trying to figure out the internet and to make it work so that we could do it from our homes. But we were not able to do that, and Julian graciously said that he would come here to do this. So we've put a lot of time and effort into making this happen for all of you guys. So we hope you appreciate it. And we still have some time here. So are there any questions? It looks like we have some questions. So what do we have? Yeah. What's your worst load-in story for a gig? Do you have one?
Oh, wow. Load-in. I really don't have a load-in story that, where the things went awry. Usually when I arrive at the venue, there's somebody to meet me, to help me in, to help me with the equipment. So I really feel like I'm treated pretty decently.
I think it's usually like drummers or organ players, or people with a lot of gear. Yeah. They have issues like that. I have a horror story. I was doing a gig at Tula's once with my trio when we were playing with Delvon. Lamar was playing with us. And we had booked the gig, and we didn't know that they had the Seattle Marathon that day. And so they had the route, so you couldn't actually get to the club. So we had to park his car over by the Seattle Center.
Yes.
In the parking lot there, and we had to wheel the Hammond B3 and the Leslie from Seattle Center to Tula's in the rain. We got it done, but I mean, that is a horror story.
That's
usually,
a horror story, yes.
Like horn players, we've got it pretty easy.
Yeah.
Vocalists have it the easiest.
Yeah.
So.
And pianists.
Yeah, exactly. Any other questions?
How was the
What was the question?
Mwandishi? Oh, how was it playing with Herbie Hancock and
my
Mwandishi?
God.
This is a whole other interview. I got so many questions I want to ask about that, but that's a great question. Yeah.
It picked up where Duke Ellington left off. My experience with Duke Ellington was wonderful. I was a little disappointed in that I was out of my environment, musically, that is. But I do love Duke's music. I mean, historically, it's really the source. I mean, what I'm doing today grows out of what Duke Ellington did in the 1920s.
Yeah.
And so I lost track of the question.
What was the experience like playing with Mwandishi and Herbie Hancock?
Yeah, okay, all right. Playing with Mwandishi was actually an extension of what I was trying to do on my own after I left Duke Ellington. I started my own band, and we were going in pretty much in the same direction that Mwandishi was going in, but maybe not to that degree. I got a call from Garnett Brown, who was playing with Herbie at the time. Garnett had a project, a writing, a composing project that he had to do, and he asked me to substitute for him with Herbie. At the time, it was the Herbie Hancock sextet. Yeah. And Garnett was supposed to be gone for like 3 weeks to do this writing project that he had to do, but he didn't come back. I was happy. I was really happy because I found a slate in music that fit my desires. It fit my goals. We were in a position where we could create on the spontaneous composition, which I was introduced to in Chicago when I was working with Sun Ra.
Mm-hmm. Also a whole nother interview. We're going to have to do another interview. I mean, it's just that I knew that coming into this.
Yeah.
But yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So I was able to draw upon the experience that I had with Sun Ra to create the kind of music that Herbie was seeking. Not just Herbie, it was Benny Maupin and Eddie Henderson, Billy Hart on drums. And of course, Buster Williams on bass. So that was a group of people who we were like brothers, and we were like brothers. We were thinking of it the same way. We had the same idea at the same time, on the stage. We could play with each other without talking to each other, and sound like the music was written.
Yeah.
But we were all doing it spontaneously.
So there was no talk beforehand. There weren't any sketches or anything. This was just you started bouncing ideas, or
maybe a sketch. Herbie would come out with an idea, and then we would take that idea and develop it, and that's where most of the music came from.
Yeah.
It was a group enterprise, and we got along pretty well musically. There were moments, in life there were always going to be moments.
As in any family, yeah.
Right, right. But we all recovered, because we felt that us, how can I put it, our collective effort overshadowed any of the conflicts that may come up, which they will, and that's life, we, to this day, we still have great regards for each other. There's still memories of conflict, but we don't hold grudges,
Yeah.
That's the thing. And in fact, the conflict was actually it was actually part of the creative effort.
Yeah.
We expressed our emotions. When like stuff does happen, on occasion we may have one or two drinks in excess and lose control.
Yeah.
That's life.
Yeah.
And whereas it was not good for that moment, we didn't let it spoil the next moment. We always forgave, let it go, and move on. And that made the whole experience special. Yeah, I never will get over it. I never will get over it.
Good. Well, any other questions that we have from watchers?
Which session did you have the most enjoyable time playing?
Oh, wow.
So the question is, which session did you have the most enjoyable time playing? I'm assuming this is a jam session or recording session or whatever.
Oh, wow, enjoyable. I tell you what, the one that I remember, it's just kind of odd, but this is a session that actually wasn't a session. It did turn into a session later, but we're in the recording studio. John Coltrane was recording
Africa Brass?
Africa Brass,
yeah.
We're in the studio recording, and Coltrane had hired this person who I'm not going to name to do the arrangements.
You can find out on the CD liner notes. It's on the internet. Okay,
No, you can't
moving
find
on.
this out. You can't find this
Fair
out.
enough.
And that's the reason why I'm not going to mention any names. But this particular individual had a personal drug issue, and he wasn't able to rehearse the band for the recording session. He wasn't able to count the band off at the beginning of the song. His count off would start at one tempo and it would slow down before the count off is over.
Yeah.
So Coltrane canceled the session and called on McCoy Tyner to come in and direct the band for a different session, and so I had two experiences with that recording. One of them didn't turn out, which that's the one that stands in my mind. The one that did work, you can hear the result on the recording, and. To answer your question, that's it.
I'm sure there's more questions. And like I said, we're going to have to do this again with your willingness, hopefully. But before we wrap up, I just want to let you know on behalf of myself and all the other students that you've taught how much we love you and we appreciate you and utilize all the lessons. I'm sure some of my students are sick of me talking about, some of the things I learned this from Julian Priester, and
yes.
So we greatly appreciate you, and we're so thankful for all of your experiences and that you've been so generous to pass them on to all of us. And we will definitely do this again. And for everybody watching, normally we ask to make donations to the nonprofit, but for this particular stuff that we're doing with Julian, we're going to set up a PayPal. He has one set up, and we're going to do this on Facebook, but also put this up on YouTube, and we'd like all donations to go to Julian for his medical expenses and financial need during this pandemic and quarantine. So please do that if you are able to, and we'll have that stuff posted up shortly. And if you don't know where to do that, if it's not up yet, just get in contact with me, or you can also contact Julian. He's on Facebook, and we'll make that happen. But thank you so much for listening and participating, and thank you, Julian, for joining us.
Okay, dear. Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure.